this edition of Eye on the Isles, sponsored by Cook Insurance. I'm Aidan Northcott alongside head coach, general manager of the Charlottetown Islanders, Jim Hulton. Jim, the Canadian junior hockey season has officially come to an end. Rouyn-Noranda obviously winning the Memorial Cup in a great game over the Halifax Mooseheads just last week. The next order of business on the Q calendar is the draft. We just actually saw, mentioning Rouyn-Noranda and the Memorial Cup, how important it is to draft and develop. You look at a team like Rouyn, they had two players on their team that weren't drafted by Rouyn win the Memorial Cup with them.
Well, very impressive. I think right now Rouyn is kind of the gold standard in our league. And when you look at 20 of 22 kids that were homegrown, it's a testament to their drafting and development. And that's the key at all levels of hockey when there's a draft system is just that. Draft accordingly, have patience with your players, and make sure that you develop them. So that's something that we've aspired to do. I think our draft record has improved drastically, in particular in the last 2 years. You know, you're starting to see the fruits of that in our lineup with 4 and 5 guys out of the last 2 drafts in particular. So that's our focus as we head into this draft.
You mentioned obviously the last 2 drafts. We saw this year the impact that 16-year-old players can have in the lineup. Players like Lucas Cormier obviously come to mind, but also a player like Xavier Fortin, who played the entire season, and Pat LeBlanc, who came up for a spell there at the end of the season and had an impact as well. Is it safe to say like these are the kind of players that you're looking to build around for the future?
Well, your draft is all about the future. Anybody that we're drafting in this upcoming draft, it's more about what's going to happen in 2 to 4 years than it is in the immediate next year. And we were fortunate last year we had a top 5 pick in Lucas, and Lucas came in and made an impact right away. But it's oftentimes dangerous to put too much expectations on a young player, and 16-year-old in particular. And again, using the Rouyn model, when you go back and really analyze their roster, they were very patient. A lot of those kids went back for a second year of midget, and you know, Patrick LeBlanc is a kid that jumps to mind. Using that scenario, who's went back, maintained his offensive confidence, had a terrific season with Moncton, I believe, finished second in scoring in the New Brunswick PEI midget league. So you're hoping he can come in with confidence high. That's always your concern with forcing a young player into the lineup, is that they lose their offensive confidence in particular.
Right, and so we obviously had some success, as you mentioned, in the last couple of years, and now we obviously with the top 5 pick last year, we had a really big boost there with Lucas Cormier. But now looking ahead to the 2018 draft, as a whole, what can fans expect? For those who aren't necessarily familiar with the draft or familiar with these minor players, what's this draft looking like? Is it a deep class? Is it filled with a certain position?
Well, it's good in terms of overall depth. I think from the defensive end right now, it drops off rather quickly, but young defensemen are also harder to assess. So there's going to be kids later on in the draft that are going to develop and play in this league for sure. It's more strong, I think, in terms of forwards. The goaltending is not as deep as it has been in other years, but I think it's top-heavy with forwards in particular, and there's some elite defensemen at the top. So every year we go through this, but at the end of the day, these kids are going to play. This is the future of our league. So it's the crystal ball comes out, and how much can you project into the future, and that's why the scouts get the big money.
And now looking at the names at the top, who are the names that fans are going to get to know? The name that's been tossed around quite a bit has been Joshua Waugh out of Quebec, Justin Robitaille. Who are some of the names that I guess stand out?
Well, those are the 2 at the top of everybody's list, everything you're reading. Waugh and Robitaille are both extremely talented offensive players. There's a lot of kids at the top. There's some terrific maritime players that are maybe undecided. Some defensemen in particular with Evan Noss, Cameron Wynot, and Oscar Plandowski. 3 really elite defensemen from the Maritimes in particular. I think those are probably the top 6 names that are being discussed in a lot of different ways. But those are the obvious ones. There's a lot of a depth of guys that, again, it's going to be a very, very intriguing day, as it always is, because there's a number of top-end players that are going to be future stars in the queue.
Now looking at our own system with Charlottetown, we don't have a first-round pick this year, but we have 2 seconds and 2 thirds, back-to-back picks in the second round and a couple in the third. What's been the strategy? What's been discussed amongst you and your staff in terms of drafting? Is it the best player available at this point, or is it looking a little more positionally?
Well, it's a little bit of both. The way we're looking at it right now is we have 4 picks in the top 50, and that's kind of our focus in terms of that, not worrying about not having a first-round draft pick. And we know that can change with moving parts to this draft, but as of right now in those back-to-back, and one of those 4 picks is going to be a goaltender. We have to make sure that we're guarding for our future. We know that Matt Walsh is heading into his final season. One will be a defenseman. Beyond that, it's more or less best player available. We're going to try to fill some needs as well, but we're not going to draft 4 forwards, for example. We're going to make sure that there are some positional needs that are met over the course of those 4 picks.
All right, now as is always the case around this time of the year, there's a lot of trade chatter, a lot of rumors floating around, especially as the season fully comes to an end and teams are done and a little more vocal in their plans for the future. What has been the sense in terms of trade chatter and trade activity amongst the general managers in the league?
Well, I think any time, case in point with our club not having a first-round draft pick, and there's probably close to a third of the league that doesn't have a first-round pick, which is the case most years. But the teams with multiple picks are always entertaining different options. So the chatter, as it always does, is starting to increase. It will magnify next week when we're all together in one setting in Quebec City with the meetings prior to the draft. So again, I think everybody has an obligation to make sure that you do what it takes to make your team better. So that means exploring trade talks, and right now it's just at that stage a lot of exploratory talks going on. Whether anything comes to fruition for ourselves is to be seen in the future.
All right, now wrapping up, Jim, a little off topic from the draft, but obviously some of the big news that's come out of Charlottetown over the past few weeks is assistant coach Brad McKenzie taking a head coaching job with the Grand Falls Rapids of the Maritime Hockey League. Has there been any update in terms of the coaching vacancy and how that'll be filled?
No, I mean, first of all, we're extremely happy for Brad. We knew this day was going to come at some point. He's a really, really good young coach who's got an extremely bright future in the game. So we're thrilled, first and foremost, for Brad that he gets this opportunity. Now it gives us an opportunity to sit back and interview and get a look at some candidates, and we've been extremely impressed and pleased so far with the response to the opening. We're going to do some interviews later this week. We're not in a real rush to fill it. We want to make sure that we get the right person. But again, intrigued by the process, and big shoes to fill, we know that, but that's also part of the game. It's no different when the players move on to a higher level or to aspirations of a different position. Brad's in the same boat, so thrilled for him, and we look forward to welcoming somebody new into the fold.
Awesome. Thanks again, as always, Jim, for taking the time, and best of luck over the next week heading into the draft.
Thank you.
Again, that's Isles head coach, general manager Jim Hulton. For Eye on the Isles and for the Charlottetown Islanders, I'm Aidan Northcott.